Hello, hello, hello again. Now it is time to grid our final paper. We're going to use the same tools that we did before, but this time you have your final size paper that's 11 by 14. You need your source photo just as reference off to the side because we're going to talk about math in a second. You need your pencil and you need your ruler. So please make sure that you have everything gathered. These are our champs and the items that you will need, and we will get started in a moment. Properly. And we are going to begin. So just like we did before, please take your ruler, find your 0 mark. This is nothing new. You guys should know all of this. So our first mark will be at 1.5 inches. Again, make sure that this tick mark is a continuation of the line. You don't want it coming off to the side. You don't want a dot. You want it exactly on where it needs to be. To make sure that this happens, you need to make sure that you're on top of your ruler. If you're sitting like really far back from your paper, there's a good possibility that your lines could be off. Also double check that you're on the right mark from the ruler. Okay? So we started at 1.5, then we go 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, 12, 13.5. So as you notice, this time around we have a small block on the end, which is absolutely fine. You're just going to have a short box on the end, and we'll talk about this in a moment. So please, once you are finished with your tick marks at the top, we're going to take our ruler and drag it down to the bottom. You don't want to turn your page around because then your tick marks will be off. So we need to make sure that the 0 all starts on the left side page. So I'm going to pull this up and repeat what I just did. 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, 12, 13.5. Okay. Once you guys get your tick marks at the top and bottom, we do them why? At the top and the bottom, because if you don't do them on both sides, your lines will be crooked. So let's make sure our lines are straight. Line your ruler up to the tick marks, just off to the side of the tick marks, not on top. This is a really good example of having to apply the right type of pressure onto your ruler and have your hand in the right place. So if I was only holding my ruler here, as I would draw, my ruler would move as it gets to the bottom. So you need to make sure that when you line your ruler up to the tick marks, you have your hand in the center of the ruler and you're applying pressure so your ruler doesn't move on you. And there's our first mark. Now guys, or ladies and gentlemen, you cannot do these lines dark. These lines need to get erased. So if you do them too dark and you can't erase them, that's going to make your end result not look good. So please draw nice and light like you see on the poster on the side of the classroom. We draw light till we know it's right, which you should always do anyway. But please make sure that your lines are nice and light. That way you don't have issues erasing it later on. I am drawing dark because I want to make sure that it's completely visible for you guys. Okay, now that you have your vertical lines completed, we need to turn the page and do the horizontal lines. So line your ruler up. I always say, keep these tick marks towards each edge. If you need to come down a little bit, that's fine. I just didn't want to do the tick marks right on top of that line. Again, we're doing the same exact grid, 1.5 inches. So 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, and 10.5. So again, we're going to end this on a little ½ inch from the edge. That is fine. I'm going to explain to you why that's happening and how we're going to alter it for our source photo. Once you have your tick marks at the top, keep your ruler in place and you're going to drag it down to the bottom. This will ensure that our little ½ inch box that's left over on the end is all in the same place. So 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, and 10.5. Now that we have all of our tick marks done, we need to connect them. So just like we did before, please take your ruler, line it up next to your tick marks, not on top of your tick marks, next to it. Hold your ruler in place and bring your line through the tick marks. Remember, that's our end goal. We want the line to almost make the tick marks disappear. Okay, now you see we have our grid. So I'm sure you're confused why we have this little box on the end. It's all going to work out okay, so just give me a moment to explain. You guys take a second to catch up and we will begin in a moment. Okay, so we are going to number and letter our grid. So let's start at the top with our numbers. Now remember, we're going to put this in the center at the very top of the page. You don't want it off to the edge or the corner because that will confuse you when you're trying to transfer your image over from your source photo. So make sure it's right in the center. You don't want it large and you don't want to push too hard because you're going to have to eventually erase all this. Okay, so it should be 10 across, including that little box off to the side. Let's do our letters. Now A and 1 go in the same box. Don't start A down here because then you're going to mess up your whole grid. So make sure A is in the proper place. Okay, so A through H. Now what I want you guys to do is to look at your photo. Okay, so if you notice there's 12 grids going across, or 12 boxes going across, and I'm sure you're like, oh no, Miss Lacey, what are we going to do? So right now we actually need to alter our source photo. And what I mean is that we need to pick 2 columns to get rid of. Okay, so basically our numbers that we drew earlier are going to be a little bit voided. But it's okay because you guys drew it in pencil. Mine's going to look a little funky because I drew it in pen. So what I need you guys to do is to look at your photo, and we need to erase 2 rows. So compositionally wise, if you could place your animal on the rule of thirds, which means if you divide your source photo into thirds, okay? So let's see if it stays. Okay, so thirds horizontally and vertically. Basically, it creates 4 intersections. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Your goal would be to get an eye of your animal or a main part of your source photo to cross over these intersections. If you can't do it, it's absolutely fine, but following the rule of thirds makes your image more interesting. So it looks like if I go this way, I can get this eye here to be more on the rule of thirds. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to take away the first 2 columns on this side. So once I pick my columns, I'm actually just going to cross them off. I'm going to use this really thick black marker so I don't get confused. I'm going to do it nice so it's nothing crazy. Okay? So that's a little bit better. That crosses over for the top rule of third, which will be good. You can basically you need to get rid of one of the you can get rid of either 2 columns on the left side, 2 columns on the right side, or 1 column on each side. That's up to you. So once you figure out which 2 columns you're getting, you could scribble it out like this. It doesn't matter. Just get rid of them and renumber your source photo. Okay, so now row 1 is actually going to start here. Okay, so now my numbers match 1 through 10. This guy will end up being a smaller box, and I'm just going to draw kind of a reference for myself for the future. And this probably isn't completely accurate, but there we go. Please make sure that your numbers and your letters are correct and it matches your grid that we just completed, and that is our activity. That is our gridding your final paper size activity for today. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and let me know. Thanks so much.